back to Game 14 today. I have 4 hitters that will make or break this Blue Jays season. It isn't exactly the best hitters on the team, but I think each of these 4 guys are super important in helping this team win. I'm not going to look at a ton of defense or base running stuff at all, mainly just how they hit at the plate. Something that we all think the Jays struggled with last season. Going to look at how they can improve and the things that went wrong. Before we really get started, let's look at the 2022 from these 4 players combined and compare them to their 2023 outputs. In 2022, these players combined for 2,422 plate appearances, a 265 average, 98 home runs, 310 RBIs, an OPS of 790, and 15.8 wins. Obviously, you can't have 0.8 wins, but they had 15 full wins. And then we look at 2023, 2,368 plate appearances. They hit 248, 75 home runs, 270 runs batted in, an OPS of 721, and 6.9 wins. Simple math would tell you that the 2022 was much better than 2023 for these 4 players. And we begin probably the most important hitter on the team, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Everyone knows that Vladdy and Bo make this team go around, so Bo's not going to be in this video. We know he's important, but if he's good, the team has nothing to worry about. But we finally saw what happens when one of these players has another huge disappointing season and plays slightly above league average. That is exactly what we saw from Vladdy in 2023. What we thought was one of the best power hitters of our generation had the same ISO as the player with the most bunt hits in baseball, TJ Friedl. Let's begin with what might have gone on. Injuries are a big thing, and Vlad comments that he dealt with them all throughout last season. You don't want to totally take them out of the equation at all, but you don't want to blame everything on them. So this was a Thomas Hall article that I read. An injury to Guerrero's left wrist caused him to miss a bit of time in May, and it remained a nagging issue for some time, even after his return. He slashed 315, 392, 523 with a 154 weighted runs created plus and a strikeout rate of 13.5% over his first 38 games. But his next 50 games heading into the All-Star break, he only slashed 242, 305, 381 with a weighted runs created plus of 90 and up 4%, a 17.4% strikeout rate. When you think of Vladimir Guerrero Jr., you have to think that wrist injuries are the worst possible thing for him as he swings the bat violently. He also dealt with a knee injury that kept him out for a little bit, but they said there was no structural damage at any point. Vlad this offseason claims that he found a better way to take care of his body, and that makes sense to me as a guy who spends more time in the big leagues. He looks like he's in much better shape than last season. Let's get into more of the fun stuff. There was a great Fangraphs article by Michael Bowman that explains a lot of what I'm going to talk about. The article was called "The New Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is Holding the Old One Back." And like most of the players in this video, the issue can be dwindled down to making too much contact. In his great 2021 season, Vlad still had a high ground ball rate, but he was able to produce such high exit velocities that they turned into base hits. He still had a high ground ball rate in 2023, but isn't able to produce the same outlier exit velocities as he was in 2021, shown by these graphs here provided by Baseball Savant. In 2023, Vlad had the highest contact rate of his career. And in 2021, he had a huge hole in his swing at the bottom third of the strike zone. And in those past 2 seasons, he has closed that. So looking at the graph, 2021 is on the left and 2023 is on the right. Again, these are taken from Baseball Savant. Vladdy made way too much contact in parts of the zone where he doesn't do damage. In 2021, he was making the most contact in the upper 2/3 of the strike zone, which also happened to be the area in which he did the most damage. Now he's turned into the contact guy. He's covered more of the plate, but he makes way less efficient contact. We can look at his weighted on base by contact and region of the strike zone. Again, 2021 on the left, 2023 is on the right here. He traded great quality of contact in his kill zone for quantity of contact everywhere else. His home run to fly ball rate dropped from 26.5% in 2021 to 14.5% last year. And that makes sense because his home runs come on hard contact up in the zone, not ones at the bottom of the zone. So if Vladdy doesn't change his ways and he still wants to make a ton of contact everywhere, he is going to need to hit the ball the hardest of anyone in all of baseball to be MVP caliber again, or else we will be disappointed in what could have been the most talented player in franchise history. And I am begging for a huge year where we can forget about 2022 and 2023 and we can chalk those down as the outlier years. Pitch selection will be a huge part of this. Hitting balls in the upper part of the zone that he can elevate is another huge part of this, and I think Vladdy can do that. The second player that will make or break this season is George Springer. George Springer had the most at-bats on the Toronto Blue Jays last season, which quite literally means he had the biggest impact at the plate and put together his worst season as a Toronto Blue Jay. In 2021, George Springer put up 2 wins in 78 games. In 2022, he put up 4 wins over a full season, and then 2023, he put up 2 wins in 154 games. George Springer's strikeout percentage was still under 20%, but his walk rate was the lowest of his career, as well as his lowest slugging percentage. He is now 33, and people started to wonder if Father Time and all those foul balls that he pelted off his shins have finally caught up to him, as well as some decreased bat speed. While we can't really tell what the bat speed actually is, that's more of an eye test, of 133 qualified hitters in baseball last season, George Springer ranked in the bottom 50 of an expected damage that had him ranked between DJ LeMahieu and Matt Vierling. George Springer ran the lowest barrel percentage of his career at 7.7% and got the least amount of fastballs by percentage of his career as well. The fastball numbers were concerning to me, as this was the first time he slugged under 520 on four-seam fastballs in the pitch tracking era, and that dropped all the way down to 449. Sliders were the pitch that got the best of George Springer, as he hit 197 and had over a 30% whiff rate against them, while having a -8 run value. I think the question should be asked if this was a team-wide philosophy or not, which I think it probably was, but George probably made too much in-zone contact. His in-zone contact was the highest of his career at 84.2%, and he had his lowest whiff percentage ever. Sounds a lot like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Like most players in baseball, the down and away pitch killed George Springer. We can look at his pitch percentage and his swings by zone, as well as his K percentage and whiff percentage, and we can see that the down and away was his absolute kryptonite. And you can put together that sliders down and away weren't going to be good for George Springer at all, a pitch that gets thrown a ton. Looking at win probability added, this was the first time in his career that he had a negative win probability added, and the first time since 2019 that he had a negative clutch rating. Pretty much everything deteriorated last season, and I don't want to chalk it up to injuries as well, but he did deal with offseason elbow surgery, and we saw guys like Bryce Harper deal with decreased power due to surgery. Again, George Springer didn't have Tommy John surgery, but it could still be an adjustment. The move to right field kept him from diving into walls at center field and kept him on the field. And again, the early returns in spring training have been great for George Springer. The exit velocities have been good. He's been hitting home runs, and the extra bases is what he needs to hit for. I want to question the use of him in the leadoff position, as his profile better suits that of a 4 or 5 hole hitter, as his OBP was worse than Matt Chapman's last season. He saw a decrease in his sprint speed, but was still able to steal the most bags of his career with 20. What are some of the fixes, in my opinion? Back to pulling the ball more. He hit the ball the other way the most he has since 2018, and I think that's because of where he was pitched, obviously. Hitting the ball out of the yard will help too. When he got brought in on a big contract, he was a guy who could hit 35 to 40 home runs. In his couple seasons in Toronto, he hasn't hit more than 25. We're in deep trouble if we see a decrease in slugging percentage again from George Springer in 2024. And as an optimist, I will believe in the bounce back, thinking George Springer is totally healthy this season. Before we continue to the last 2 players, I just want to plug our opening day watch party. It's going to be brought to you by Sports Interaction, and we are going to be at St. Louis Bar and Grill on 595 Bay Street in Toronto. That's going to start at 3:30. We're going to be there watching the game, drink beers, eat food, and to have a good time watching our birds. The third player that is going to make or break this season, I believe, is Alejandro Kirk. Kirk becomes so much more important when you realize he has 414 more plate appearances than Danny Jansen over the last 2 seasons. And Jano, once again, banged up to start this season. Let's start at spring training 2023. Kirk was expecting to play for Team Mexico in the World Baseball Classic, but was late reporting to camp with the birth of his daughter. Because he was late, the Jays didn't let him go play for Team Mexico, and he still had a limited number of at-bats in spring training. I was reading in an Athletic article where they quoted him and Hunter Mentz, a Blue Jays hitting coach, and this is what they had to say. What contributed to his down year at the plate, Kirk said, is how pitchers were attacking him and his inability to adjust quickly enough. According to Mentz, pitchers began throwing Kirk more breaking balls overall and much earlier in counts. Early in the count, he would just let those pitches go, and he found himself in deeper counts earlier in 2-strike counts earlier than what he had previously. It took him some figuring out and understanding how to still get a swing off or still be able to swing on something that was slower, opposed to just seeing fastball and assuming that fastball was coming. What happens, honestly, it's like the more respect you get as a hitter, the more they start to pitch you backwards. Kirk spent most of this season at home in Tijuana before traveling to Dunedin to work out at the player development complex in January. He said that he focused his workouts on a stronger lower half, especially his legs, so that he can be more explosive both offensively and behind the plate. The one thing that I thought was interesting that they mentioned was his problem was not sitting in his backside in the swing, and he was drifting forward. And that makes sense. When you get thrown a lot of breaking balls, you're going to reach at a pitch, you're going to drift forward to make contact on that, and they're throwing you 99 miles an hour fastball. You're going to be geared up for that. You see breaking pitch, extend, drift, reach, shitty contact. 2023 was the first time in his professional career that his bat wasn't great. He slashed 285, 372, 415 with 14 home runs and a weighted runs created plus of 129 in his Silver Slugger year 2022. Followed that up with a stinker, 250, 334, 358, 8 home runs and a weighted runs created plus of 96. I was talking to our good friend Zoobs, and he showed me a picture of Kirk's swing chart after I posed the question about him also probably making too much contact. He had the same problem as Springer with the down and away pitch. Kirk had some of the worst expected damage in all of baseball, and Zoobs once again said that in the down and away range, he had 0 barrels, 0 hard hits, and 80% ground balls while swinging a ton there. And again, there isn't much damage to be done with that pitch at all. With his low exit velocities, they aren't going to go for base hits. Due to his swing decisions in this zone, he had a bottom 6% of the league expected damage next to guys like Yasteriori Ruiz and Whit Merrifield. Those guys are not known for making great loud contact. And again, most of your whiffs are going to be in breaking pitches in that zone, but making less contact there would be a good thing for Kirk, who obviously isn't beating many squibbers out that barely make it in the infield. For the second year in a row, Kirk is in the top 2% strikeout rate in all of baseball, and his 10% walk rate is really good. He ran the best zone contact percentage of his career at an elite 93.3%. We know what Kirk is. He is going to make a ton of contact. He's not going to strike out. He is the opposite of the modern player, but he needs to have perfect launch angles pretty much. If he gets back to liners up the middle instead of soft on the ground, he can easily be back to a 4-win player, and that all starts at the plate. He was a big damper on the Jays' output last season as he had a win probability added of negative 2.41. The early spring returns are great for Kirk. He's hit more fly balls than ground balls, and he has 3 home runs in 10 games. If you go back, he had 8 home runs in 123 games last season. Kirk is fantastic behind the plate, and he is super important while he hits as well, and I expect a big bounce back in the hitting category for our king. And the last player is Dalton Varsho. I think Varsho got put in a bad spot when he traded for the best prospect in the system and a fan favorite in Lourdes and Gabriel Moreno, and he never seemed comfortable at the plate last year. There was multiple times throughout the season where we heard Dalton Varsho tweaking his swing and trying something new. Those aren't things that happen when we have a confident hitter at the plate. We also heard the Kevin Kiermaier quote where he thought that Dalton Varsho was just doing too much as well. I actually think that Dalton Varsho's profile has the makings of a solid major league hitter, despite the down year in 2023. Let's start with the positive. He didn't do the same thing that everyone else in this video did, and that was make a ton more contact and substitute that for power. Dalton Varsho was top 10 amongst qualified hitters in both fly ball percentage and pull percentage, while hitting 7 less home runs than the year before. He could also make an argument that he's the best fielder in all of baseball, and that will help him every year at the end when you look at the wins above replacement department. The thing about having a great fly ball percentage and a great pull percentage, if they aren't hit at the optimal launch angle, then it doesn't really mean that much, because he had a lot of infield fly balls and they didn't translate to a ton of home runs. The nice thing from Varsho is that he increased all his expected stats from 2022, including his max exit velocity. But Dalton Varsho was mostly hurt by a drop in barrel percentage. I think this is the year we will see a dip from Kevin Kiermaier and a huge breakout from Dalton Varsho. That might happen if Kevin Kiermaier is hurt, which unfortunately is something that happens a lot. The Dalton Varsho problem is fastballs up in the zone and just dealing with velo in general. He only had 16 hits on pitches thrown over 95 miles an hour last season, and I think you see that pretty much every single night. He only had 2 barrels on balls that were middle in and up last season. He sent a bunch of those baseballs to the moon. The problem was that after they landed on the moon, they came right back down to the infield. or he just swung and missed. I think it's time for Dalton Varsho to go Mike Trout mode. I know that's not easy to do. Mike Trout's a pretty good player and is right. Just say no to high fastballs, knowing that you can't do damage with those pitches. And that was shown by his 19% infield fly ball rate. Last year, most of his at-bats came from the 7th spot in the lineup, but we have seen him hit mostly 5 in this lineup in spring. I mean, they're not going to do that to a guy that they are not confident in. And a nice little wrinkle in what I was looking at Dalton Varsho's stats is that he slugged 70 points better against relievers than starters. I'm not going to put any weight to that, just something interesting. Dalton Varsho might be having the best spring of anyone on the Jays. And today, he hit a home run off an Orioles lefty, and that was the first home run against a left-handed pitcher for Dalton Varsho, September 9th, 2022, and that includes last year's spring training. That was from our friend Iggy on Twitter. A John Anderson tweet, StatCast has now captured 42 plate appearances from Dalton Varsho, and he has an elite 92% contact percentage in that time. Last year, his contact rate was 75%. And finally, we look at his stats. TJ Stats, great guy to follow on Twitter. 45 plate appearances from Dalton this spring. His OPS, over 1,000. His strikeout rate, 8.9%. Walking at a 20% clip. Zone swing percentage, 71.6%. Out of zone swing percentage, 12.4%. And his whiff rate at 9.2%. Again, the spring stats don't matter as soon as March 28th hits and they start beginning play in the Trop. But I love everything I've seen from Dalton Varsho and ready for him to be super valuable to this team at the plate, not just in the field. Well, there it is, folks. 4 players I think that will make or break this Blue Jay season at the plate. Let me know what you guys think of the players. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.